think things have just been getting better.
It's been on a steady uphill climb. Like everything's looking good. Everything's looking great.
Everything's just been expanded on, improvements everywhere. This thing's just getting big, and you think, oh, we're gonna take this game to Washington. This is gonna be great, and it was just aight.
Yeah, well, Washington. When you think Washington, and you think bitter rivals, I can't think of anything more fierce than the Chicago Blackhawks.
Yeah, I mean, just from being from different conferences, not even in the same division, meeting in the playoffs 0 times, I can't think of more animosity of fan bases and teams.
Oh, absolutely.
I can't even describe these fan bases going after each other.
Well, and not only that, but the jersey choices for this year were also just aight.
Yeah, just okay.
So Washington, at this point, was already using their inaugural season, that Winter Classic look from the first game that they played in, as their alternate third jerseys.
Mm-hmm. It was really popular because they wore it in the playoffs.
Absolutely. So you're definitely expecting something new. They're not just going to do that again. And what other options do they have? The teal eagle,
they could have done
the
that.
Black Capitol building one.
But you don't want to do that.
No, it definitely doesn't fit with the overall Winter Classic aesthetic of vintage or
old time
new vintage,
hockey.
retro. Yeah, those two looks were very, very 90s, early 2000s. They just don't really age too well.
Yeah, I don't think we're ever going to see him for something. We ain't going to see him.
We're
not going to see
him
him again.
I'm okay with it.
Yeah.
It is weird going back and seeing Ovechkin wear those jerseys, but other than that, I don't ever want to see it again.
Yeah, I don't want to see it.
So what Washington did, they dug into a bunch of Washington hockey, obviously not from the NHL because the Capitals are the only team. They had to go to different leagues throughout Washington hockey history to create
the AHL and the EHL, Eastern Hockey League.
So the Washington Lions and the Washington Presidents.
Yep. So that stripe pattern that's on these uniforms is from a old President's uniform, and especially the W, because the W was on the sleeves of those 59 to 60 Washington Presidents. And they had other uniforms where they had like more stripes, and they had the numeral on the chest.
On the chest,
and back. But the one that they emulated in these Winter Classics was the one that just had the 4 stripes on the shoulder, and then the W was on the sleeve.
Right.
So the other elements about it, like the stars, that's taken from their classic uniforms.
Right.
They had them on the sleeves already, and then they decided to get the Capitals and put that on top of the W, put stars on that too, and it's definitely something.
Yeah.
It
definitely something you would find in the Old Navy winter collection.
It definitely looks like it's a casual sports fans attempt at, like if some guy that wasn't really into sports and he's like, oh, my friends invited me, I gotta go to the Caps game, what do we do? And then he goes to Old Navy and finds some generic looking sweatshirt.
It's just got like a hockey stick on it and says
and
Washington hockey.
Washington hockey.
That's definitely the feeling I get from this thing.
I mean, it's the strangest one out of all the uniforms. This one just doesn't seem to match or fit in the same universe as the rest.
No, not at all. And like we said, it definitely just feels like a really poorly executed hybrid. Good ideas, good intention, but
yeah, they had a good intention.
Just falls short.
Yeah.
But I don't know, what's worse, this or Chicago's attempt at making a jersey that looks like the jersey they already wear?
Yeah, because the elements that they did use that are different are from their 1958 sweaters, and That's when you had the shoulder patch that's on the shoulders now, and it have been for a long time, are moved to the sleeves like they were in the 50s. And the colors were changed up.
Colors a little bit
so
different.
The C's red, the sticks of the tomahawk are white, and so are the heads of the tomahawk are red. And those just get moved down to the middle of the sleeve there. And then you have the numerals above that in black without the red outline that you see now. And same thing on the back.
But they kept the Chief Blackhawk head that they're currently wearing.
Yeah.
They didn't use an era authentic one, which it has changed. It's gone over a couple makeovers here or there.
Yeah.
For the most part, pretty much the same idea. We all know what it looks like, but there have been different iterations.
Yeah, very subtle, like rotation.
Yeah.
And outline color and proportions of the nose, eyes, and then like the feather colors.
The feathers,
like all
yeah.
of those little details have changed a lot, even though they're subtle. But I'm just really shocked that they wouldn't do anything with the logo. They just kept the same one.
Yeah. So the only time we get anything close to that would be when they play St. Louis a little bit later. But
Yeah. So yeah, that's a pretty forgettable Winter Classic. We want to start getting to improvements, and at least the next year, that follow-up definitely helps.
the follow-up was a big one at that.
It was huge to bring back the Winter Classic from just lame city.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Absolutely. And you can argue that this game was probably not terribly exciting. It was kind of a one-sided match. However, the look of it was fantastic. One of my favorites, personally. The two teams we have, Montreal and Boston Bruins.
Now that's a rivalry instead of the last year.
Unless, right.
Finally getting appropriate rivalry, and both the teams were a good number of Montreal not playing in any, and Boston only in one. So
Absolutely, and it had been a
having
while.
to
They were
be
at
in
least
Boston
removed.
everything made sense for this one. So let's start with the Canadians.
Let's
'Cause
definitely
that
start with
was,
the Canadians.
That's a good looking sweater you got
An
there.
absolutely gorgeous sweater, one of my favorites. So, and the cool thing about this one too, another hybrid. This is a look that we're all familiar with. The center striping pattern, very common. A lot of people know Montreal. It's one of the most easily recognizable jerseys in NHL, I would argue.
Oh yeah.
So what they did was actually dug into their World Champions jerseys from the early and mid 20s. They had the white C, this which is a little more open. Obviously, you can see no thicker outline
Yeah, I
on
mean,
the outside.
this exact logo was used back in those 20s uniforms on the red, since they didn't need white.
Right, they didn't
so
have a
they
white
had,
jersey.
They had this logo on the red, and then another part of that was these shoulder patches here.
Which was actually, this was the main crest during one season right after they won, and it actually had a little banner on the bottom that said World Champions.
1924-25.
Well, it just said champions because it's a picture of the
Well,
world.
that's when that was used.
Right.
On there.
So they put
yeah.
this guy front and center, and this white C was actually where these globe logos are.
That's right.
And then the other big difference on this is actually the color. This blue is unique. They've never used this light of a blue before on
Right.
any of their jerseys.
I mean, sweaters might have looked like that after they were worn out.
Right.
Something like that.
Maybe something
but
like that.
I don't think it was an intention from the designers. I mean, there wasn't really people thinking about that kind of stuff back then. They just tried to get something on their players, just so they could actually wear them and stay warm.
Right.
So they had this different blue. It's a tint of what they have now because it's got white added to it.
And this striping, the middle stripe has not been on a white jersey since the mid 40s.
Yeah, 44 to 47 is when you saw the away jersey with the reverse of the home.
Right.
and I always like that one.
I love them. I
love
think
'em.
translating both jerseys like that, I think looks really good. And again, just a unique package, a unique overall jersey package.
I mean, it looks good with the white C, how they have it bordered in here, because on those 40s ones, you know, you still had the red and white outline slapped on top of blue, so it was a little hard to read. This is a lot easier to see. So with this being a white uniform, this was all these ideas that they came up and combined created one of the best Winter Classic jerseys. And we're gonna find out where it lies in the power rankings later on.
Absolutely. And I think one of the coolest parts about this Winter Classic as well, Boston did as well. Unfortunately, you can't see it as well just because theirs is a black collar on a black jersey. But this ribbed collar look that really emulates that sweater look. Obviously, we see St. Louis did it too. Fantastic new design. A lot of teams have been doing the lace down. And
yeah, those became kind of tiresome.
It just,
Yeah, they're not
too much of a
exciting
good
anymore,
thing.
you know.
Right. And even when Montreal went back to them, it's like, obviously they deserve to do it, but it's just not exciting anymore.
Yeah, I mean, they're not. They're pretty ubiquitous now.
So many teams have, and new teams have those new tie downs, like Anaheim and Winnipeg. They're just built into the jersey, and just those bar stripes.
Yeah.
And again, it's whatever. I would really like to see the 70s and 80s V-necks come back.
Yeah, I think having the V-necks without the taper to them that you see the Reebok uniforms do, and having the NHL logo in there, but like get it more uniform like you used to see back in the 80s and 90s.
Absolutely.
Those deep V's. Get those Gretzky V's back.
Absolutely.
I want to see that.
But we need to turn it to Boston for their
right.
jerseys.
Yeah, they brought back their original look from the 20s when it was brown and yellow. I mean, the 1924 uniforms, they were just brown. And the logo that they use for the Winter Classic is the same one that they use. So they changed it up and replaced brown with black, except for the Bruin in the logo.
Right, they kept that brown.
They kept that brown.
Cool, but again, why wouldn't they just make the entire jersey brown?
I would have liked to see all brown.
Absolutely.
I would have loved to see that.
Because that, to me, is what separates them from Pittsburgh. And I know Pittsburgh changed to yellow
Boston
and black
had it
later.
first.
Right. But Boston had brown first. And
That's
again,
true. And they got rid of it.
that's a unique color palette for the NHL. Nobody's got brown and yellow.
Nope.
So
No one really has brown.
stop complaining and just change it. But you can.
Yeah, it's like if it's out there, take it back.
Just take it back.
Pittsburgh ain't gonna change. You know now they ain't gonna change it back now.
Now they're set on
They're making dollars.
that Mario Lemieux look, which is a great look.
I agree.
So
That's the only thing I would change about Boston.
yeah,
All
again,
brown.
but a good look. And again, they love these in Boston. They're wearing them now as their alternates.
Yeah.
So
Maybe you
again,
should.
good look.
But this is another good where both the teams, they contrasted so well with each other, but they also were cohesive. in
Yeah,
the look.
both jerseys definitely look like they exist in the same era. Even though, the Canadians is kind of a piece and match of a couple different eras, and Boston's kind of an update of their original. They still, both jerseys have that real tying feel to them. They feel like they're in the same universe within this one-off game.
Yeah, that's the strength of the Winter Classic. So you're thinking, all right, we got to have some new teams come into this, because we've had how many teams played in this twice?
A lot of teams have played in it twice.
A lot of teams have played in it twice. So we got to get some new blood, some young blood.
So, what if I told you that that's a bad idea and we're going to have Chicago play again?
All right.
Well, guess what? Chicago played again.
Yeah, so we got Chicago, and this is why the 2015 one, they shouldn't have been in that one, so they could save their appearance to be in a more logical matchup.
Which, it does make sense. So, St. Louis was the host team during
Caterpillar
the
Stadium.
2016-2017 Winter Classic in Busch Stadium, an awesome venue to do it in. And yeah, nobody expected St. Louis to have a Winter Classic ever in the history of the NHL, really.
And it definitely helped that the Rams leaving because NFL hates St. Louis, and then moving out to Los Angeles. And you actually thought, oh, Gary Bettman's sympathetic. He was sympathetic to St. Louis, and he said, you know what, I'm going to get you a Winter Classic. And it's like, oh, well, thanks, Gary.
That was
So
definitely the best part of losing whatever football team we had.
yeah, you know, I'd rather have Winter Classic. So
It's true. So anyway, we got to talk about the Blackhawks first.
let's talk about them
Let's
first.
just get it out of the way.
Because what is different about these uniforms from the 2015 ones? They look exactly the same, right?
They look pretty damn identical.
For all intents and purposes, it is a repeat of effort from the Blackhawks. They thought they could trick their fans and other people into thinking that, no, this is new. Or maybe they're trying to trick us into thinking it was the same thing.
Yeah.
I can't tell because it's really similar. Out of all the uniforms they've had in their history, from just black and white to red, black, and white stripes.
To be fair, they did use a different crest finally.
Yeah, the logo they used was definitely more appropriate and accurate.
It was that Stan Mikita era. And the whole jersey was supposed to replicate that.
The 56, 57
Late 50s, yeah.
specifically because of the logo and
The Tomahawk logo again being down on the
On the
sleeve instead of
sleeves.
on the shoulders.
the numerals on the back were black with no red outlines on them. But the differences between these and the 2015 ones, since the 56, 57 ones, they didn't have numerals on the sleeves. And the Tomahawk was, for just the Winter Classic uniforms, they used the yellow with the red sticks and white heads, which
Right.
is different from what you would have seen in 56, 57. Those were on the home reds,
Right.
that version of it. And that's pretty much the only difference with these Winter Classics. They decided to use a variation of the secondary logo.
Right.
But the only problem is, if you would just got rid of 2015, I would have been okay with these.
Would have been much better. Or even dig all the way back to the black and white jerseys.
I would have liked to see that too.
Resurrect that all white jersey.
Haven't seen it
Since they're
yet.
the visiting team, obviously you got to do a white jersey, but just with a bold black design and update the crest to be black and white.
Yeah.
Or even, do a new reproduction of the circle logo that they had during those jerseys.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot that they could have done.
A lot of potential.
There's a lot of potential out there for them.
Saying that they
I
only
wouldn't be
have like
seeing-
2 jerseys to play with is not true.
Yeah.
Sure, they're
definitely.
limited, but you can do something new. You can
Well,
make it exciting.
if you're a designer, you should be able to do anything.
Right, and we've seen other teams do it. We've seen teams create. Look at Philadelphia, New York, brand new
Right.
jerseys.
That's right. There's a good example.
So, whatever. Anyway, we move on to St. Louis, and honestly, they did what everybody thought they were going to do. They
Yeah.
resurrected a classic look, their inaugural season, albeit some changes, but I think a lot of people knew that this was the direction they were going in.
All right, so it's very appropriate being the 50th anniversary of all the 67 franchises that still exist. And the Blues would go back to the original look.
Absolutely. It's overall just a leaner look from what they have now.
Right.
Currently not a bad look, but with the navy shoulders, it really weighs the entire jersey down.
Yeah, especially with the pants being navy for both home and away.
Which looked
And-
black on television, honestly.
Right. From far away, it just looks black. So those home uniforms with navy blue shoulders and pants, you don't get a lot of blue out of the uniform, which is what people want to see.
I mean, it's the
They're the Blues.
namesake.
They're the Blues. They should be all blue.
So they go back to the 67 jerseys,
Oh yeah. Oh, they look good.
bring in this ribbed collar, just a really awesome look.
Yeah,
era appropriate because
Right.
they were sweaters
They
back
took
then.
the crew neck sweater and had the same material from the Montreal Winter Classic uniform and applied it to this one, so that looked awesome. And we have pretty much a 90% good uniform.
I thought it was 100% good.
Well, that's what they would have told you if you looked at the tweets and press releases from the organization.
I thought it was 100% era accurate.
Perfection.
Perfection.
That's what was told to people, but there's like one thing wrong.
It's just one thing.
It's
It is just one thing. And it's quite an anomaly of a thing, really. And we're going to talk about that on the next episode of Winter Class, where we talk about the history of the St. Louis Blues
Right.
and the Blue Note. A lot
Yeah.
more iterations out there than I think most people believe there to be.
Right. I mean, even the official website only has 4.
And that ain't right.
And only 2 of them are correct.
Right.
So am I surprised? Yes. Are you surprised? I don't know. Yeah, you should be.
You should.
I
You
mean-
absolutely should be.
You would think that an organization that has all the access and knowledge to their own history would get it right. So, from what we know, in our research, there's been 7 iterations of the Blue Note.
Not including merchandise
Right.
and outside jersey specific Blue
Right.
Notes.
Because there's been
more than a dozen, really.
Blue Notes you've seen on programs, pucks, apparel, center ice that are different from what was actually on the sweater. So since we're talking about what appeared on the sweater, there have been 7, and we'll go in depth with that in the next episode. So what they were trying to do with this one is the original from the 67 uniforms, and they wore those up until the mid 80s.
Right.
We'll explain what happened,
We'll talk about
because
it.
it's a lot.
It is a
The
lot.
whole release.
The whole episode worth.
It's a whole episode worth of info, but right now we're just gonna do what they did well, because most of it's good.
It is mostly good. The new tint of blue
That's
is
right.
fantastic. Brings it up a little bit. They're trying to recreate the colors based off of old photos, and again with old cameras, old stadium lighting, you're gonna get almost a different blue with every picture you look at.
Right, especially since the material of those sweaters are so different from today.
Oh,
'Cause
absolutely.
They're so heavy. I mean, they're really snaggy. You can snag them on stuff really easily, and they had a sheen to them. They were pretty shiny, and the production of actually putting the logo on each sweater, since that material was hard to apply and stitch on, like you're gonna get a lot of variations with Blue Notes, especially with different angles and photos. You might have gotten some different looks to it, which is kind of one of our hypotheses that we're gonna discuss next episode.
Absolutely.
But the blue color, since Reebok has their color book of swatches for their apparel, they had to go the next value up, next tint up from what the royal blue that they use now. So this is why it's probably lighter than most people expected, but it definitely looks like it's from the 60s. From fans' perception of what they would have looked like based on photographs
Right.
and footage. So it definitely, if it makes it look like it's from 67, that's what you're trying to do.
That's exactly what they're
So,
doing. Yep.
Success there.
But overall, these look good. They looked good at the Winter Classic with the outdoor lighting, and it was a pretty foggy, rainy, misty, shitty day.
Yeah.
And they're wearing them a couple more times before the playoffs, and they look fantastic
Yeah.
with the indoor lighting too.
Which and the social media and television broadcasts, they keep harping on how good these look. So
They
I
hype
feel
them
like
up.
they're gonna switch to full time. Now is a good time more than ever, because
Especially with Adidas taking over, and
Right.
third jerseys are going out the window for at least a season.
Right.
Makes sense. I'm not mad about it. I know it's
Yeah, it makes sense now that you
Reebok did it
understand
too
that.
when they took it over. So
Right. So hopefully we're gonna see a white uniform of their, not the original ones, but what you would have seen at the alumni game.
Right.
And get those as the away uniforms and just have those full time. Do what Pittsburgh did, do what Edmonton did, do what Buffalo did.
Bring it back.
And bring back iconic looks that you don't need to mess with. And Philadelphia, they did too.
If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
That's right.
But that pretty much wraps up all the Winter Classics, which brings us to one of my favorite segments of the show.
That was your favorite segment of the show?
It's one of my favorite segments of the show.
Power
Rankings.
Yeah.
So Power Rankings, we're going to top 3, we're going to count them down. Our favorite Winter Classic jerseys.
That's right.
So number 3, Doug, what are you going to give this one to?
I'm going to give this one to the Philadelphia Flyers in 2012.
2012 Philly. It's a good look. Again, for a team that doesn't have a whole lot of jersey history, really.
Yeah. But
For
they
them
didn't use that as a liability. That's
Exactly.
what I think is successful about these.
They created something brand new with that vintage feel to it, and again played off of the New York jerseys so well. Both of those jerseys look really good in that arena, but Philly really pulled it out.
Yeah. I think they did enough to make sure that it stayed Philadelphia. They did enough to make sure it was new, and they did enough to make sure it was orange.
Very orange.
So, what would be number 2?
Number 2, I want to give this one number 1, but because of one thing, I'm giving number 2 to St. Louis.
Yeah, I mean, we had to just because of our opinionated ranking system. It's really hard to be objective when you're human.
Absolutely.
We had to give another uniform number 1 just because of accuracy.
Absolutely.
But
these jerseys look really good. Everybody had a good feeling that this is what St. Louis was going to do with their Winter Classic jersey. But again, until you really see it and understand and appreciate it, both stylistically and on the ice in action, that really brings it out even more. And once we saw these during the Winter Classic game, they just looked really, really good.
I mean, it's exciting.
It's very
It's exciting to see because
it's really
not
fresh.
blue.
St. Louis hasn't really done anything vintage or retro.
Yeah, they haven't really caught on to a trend that's been going on since 2008.
For sure.
So it's nice to finally get a team that has a lot of good design to get in on that trend and actually embrace it and do it really well in execution.
Absolutely. Which brings us to number 1.
Number 1, Montreal.
Gotta be Montreal.
Montreal.
Look, first of all, you have multiple elements feeding into this thing. Several different eras, and you got these unique patches and crests. This one, the World Champions logo, only appearing on one jersey, but translated from, it was a center crest, now it's on the arm patch.
Yep.
Flipping with this version of the C, this white version of the C, though, really stands out on this blue and white metal stripe.
Yeah, I found a good way to incorporate 3
eras.
3 distinct eras of Canadians history, and since there should be a lot, I mean, there's not, just because of their iconic red sweaters. So for them not being the home team, they had to think of, well, how we make a good white uniform, and all the accuracy that's gone into these 3 elements combined to make a very unique.
But then tweak it a little bit. You bring in a new tint of blue.
That's right.
This middle striping was only seen on one iteration of their white jerseys. But again, it's the accuracy, it's the attention to detail, but it's also bringing new elements to it as well.
Yeah, and the French L and H.
And that too.
The shield there. It's even more accuracy. Over
Absolutely.
the edge there, I think accuracy and combination into an original idea is why Montreal's got to get #1 in the power rankings.
But it just overall just looks good.
Oh yeah, it looks good.
It looks real good. So at the end of that brings us to one of my other favorite segments of the show.
Well, your favorite segment.
One of my favorite segments.
All right.
Brettzky's Corner. So one of the other cool things about the Winter Classic is the goalies. They get to go all out. You see those faux vintage retro kits, the brown leather, but on the new pads, which just absolutely looks awesome. I've played with a couple of goalies who have those in pickup games, and they're just fantastic. They look absolutely sick. So you get to see that a lot, but even some goalies still go with the more traditional pads, but bringing the elements of those jerseys, like Lundqvist did it during his game against Philadelphia. He just translated that off-white and darker blue and red onto his pads. Looked fantastic. Anytime I see a goalie wearing a toque on his mask, it's absolutely awesome. It's just an overall cool look. Some people think it's goofy, but whatever. I think it's awesome. But one of the coolest things, one of my favorite parts about being a goalie is masks, helmet design, paintings. They're just a canvas, an awesome way for a goalie to express himself. And there's a long history going behind them. But the Winter Classic has definitely brought out some really cool and unique looks.
As it should.
Absolutely. But one thing I do need to mention before I dig into that is how these vintage looks can kind of go wrong with Carey Price and his kind of bizarre tribute to Jacques Plante. Good idea, gone wrong. So he took Jacques Plante's original mask, the iconic first goalie mask, a lot of people call it. Technically it wasn't, but still, he was the notoriety here. Put that on his helmet, but he also put Jacques Plante's face superimposed on the mask as well. So you see his ears and his eyes kind of bugging out, and it just looks creepy. It's just
definitely more creepy and cool.
Right. But somebody who took that idea and I think did it a little bit better, translated it a little bit better to the modern equipment was Corey Crawford from this past year against St. Louis. He took that old Jason-style mask and just put that on a new helmet. Obviously, but he took out the eyes and nose piece. We just assumed that's part of the cat eye where his face would be now. Right. But I think it translated a lot better onto that.
It's a very clean look. I like that one better.
Absolutely. An honorable mention I got to put out to Braden Holtby during his bout during the Old Navy jerseys. He actually did a tribute to Olaf Kolzig when he was first with the Capitals during their red, white, and blue days. He had an awesome Uncle Sam design, real clean lines, shapes, big old stars on it too. Braden had a little more of that airbrush detail going on, which I'm not the biggest fan of. You just can't really see it from far away. The classic lines during those late 80s, early 90s, mid 90s kind of masks, my favorite. But overall, I thought it was a really good tribute. But honestly, my favorite, I got to give this one to Marc-Andre Fleury. The dude just has awesome style sensibility when it comes to kits and helmets. You can say what you want about the guy. I absolutely dig everything that he does stylistically. So he was the first, he rocked those obnoxiously bright yellow pads back
after like decades of just white.
Right, a bunch of people just doing white. He brought those out. He toned it down a little bit after that, but his masks have always been awesome. And one of my favorites, I'm going to put this one out here as my top favorite for Winter Classic masks, has to be his 2011 one. The tribute to Michael Dion, who had one of the most bizarre looking old school helmets I've ever seen.
I mean, that one's scary.
It's very scary. It's got this weird beak shape going on. He looks like a penguin.
Right.
Really, I mean, he does.
Yeah.
Like, that mask has the oddest shape.
It looks like a penguin is playing hockey, or like the Empire Stormtrooper.
Right.
Like a club hockey team.
Yeah.
Like after hours.
It's just a very
like that
bizarre
mask
look.
shape.
But the paint job that he did with it was he had the yellow up top, the white in the middle, and then the beak part of it was black because that's when they were black and gold penguins.
Right.
But since he was doing the blue, the bottom part of it is that deeper navy blue. A lot of people think it's black, but you can see some photos. It kind of highlights a little bit of blue.
Right.
And you got the yellow up top with that scarf skating penguin on top. But the way that the actual mask shape translated to that helmet was just an incredible package overall. Probably easily one of my favorites as far as the Winter Classic.
That's a
masks.
clean looking mask.
It's a very clean looking mask. Just easy to see from far away. Simple shapes, simple colors. Works really well.
Success.
And
And how you
make the save.
Brettzky's Corner, ladies and gentlemen. So, what do we do next?
Probably one of your favorite segments of the show.
favorite segments.
One of your favorite segments.
All right. Let's see, my segments. I find something awesome that's related to the topic, and I think it's one of my picks that is six. Flick's Sick Picks. So for Winter Classic, there is a lot to pick from.
Absolutely.
I got hats, I got t-shirts,
Socks.
jackets, hoodies, and
Bumper stickers.
koozie cups, keychains, all kinds of
Too
stuff.
much.
There's
It's
a
too
lot
much.
of stuff to pick from.
But
And,
what are you picking, man?
I'm gonna pick the official scarf of, you guessed it, Montreal Canadiens 2016. Because that scarf, out of all the ones I've seen, and since I had to pick the best of the best, the reason why this one is my sick pick is the use of the Globe logo. Putting that secondary logo on that scarf, and the way that it's blown up, and you get the two parts of it, so when you wrap it around, you can make the whole of it on there. And then of course it's got the Winter Classic logo type, the French one, and it's all the colors. Obviously it just matches. If you had this sweater and the scarf, you would just look like camouflage, like you were in Canadian camouflage.
Canadian camouflage.
So you could go up to Montreal, just wear that, and no one would be able to see you. And that's why I gotta give that my sickest of picks.
Well, that's been Winter Class. Very glad you guys could join us tonight. Stay tuned. Next week, we're going to talk about the St. Louis Blues and the history of the Blue Note.
This has been Winter Class.